This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
As would be expected, several of the jurors who were present and took part in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell are now beginning to speak out and share their opinions, share their thoughts, share what was going on in their minds and maybe what was going on in the minds of some of their fellow jurors while trying to evaluate the case against Lori Vallow Daybell. I wanted to go over some of the quotes from some of these jurors that we have been seeing in the last handful of days, because I think it gives us a really interesting insight into what was standing out to them in this case. You got to remember, the jurors, they did not have access to the world of information and speculation that we all live in every day. They weren't listening to the podcast. They weren't watching television. They weren't seeing the coverage, as long as they were following the rules. So when you're basing your decision on whether or not to put someone away for the rest of their lives or to death, although death was not on the table for Lori, it is still for Chad, though. They're basing it all on what they're consuming from within the confines of that courtroom. Not necessarily years of watching Dateline or listening to our podcast. So here's what one of the jurors had to say. Saul Hernandez. He spoke with Nate Eaton of East Idaho News. And if you've not been following Nate on his coverage of this, you should. He's been stellar at covering this case from day one. And he sat down with juror Saul Hernandez, who actually said that initially he was unconvinced that the Idaho prosecutors had proven her guilt. What was it that proved her guilt to him? The gruesome evidence made it harder to look at the mom. In an interview with Good Morning America, Mr. Hernandez expressed strong revulsion when confronted with photographs of the couple joyfully dancing at their beach wedding in Hawaii shortly after the perplexing death of Tammy Daybell in early 2019. Remember, that was the photo where Summer, her sister, said, "Your children are missing or dead and you're dancing on the beach?" And then Lori made the comment of, I deserve happiness too. Lori didn't do herself any favors there. Mr. Hernandez also said, "Growing up, you talk about good and bad, God and evil. And I think for the first time in my life, I put a face to evil." Now, we've talked about that on the show quite a bit. When we try to analyze what happens in someone's mind to allow them to go down the road to orchestrate the murder of your own children. I guess, I don't know, it's maybe a little more understandable when it's the spouse. We see that every day. We see children getting murdered every day by their parents too. But, domestic abuse is not anything new. I guess neither is murdering your children. But at the same point, I think we see more of that. It's in no way excusing it or saying, it's just a regular thing. But it takes something even more evil and disturbing to do that to your kids. He said, "I just couldn't believe how someone can be that happy when your kids are in the ground. And the person that was key in all of this is sitting across from you, smiling at you and dancing with you on the beach." He also was convinced from the prosecution's argument that Vallow was definitely a wannabe cultist, driven by exactly what was said at the beginning: money, power, and sex, to kill her children and conspire to help Chad murder Tammy as well. Of the couple's pseudo-religious fantasies, he said they wanted to believe something that only applied and benefited them, only applied and benefited those people they liked, their circle that they liked, and they wanted to be around. Another juror, her name is Tiffany. She was juror number 17. She spoke with television station KTVB to share her thoughts on the case. She said, "It's been an incredibly surreal experience for me. It was just so bizarre. It was almost like, one of those little puzzles with 1,000 pieces in it, and you're putting, little pieces together slowly." She goes on to say that not being able to understand how anybody could, do that to their own children, it was so hard for me. I can't even comprehend, what goes through someone's mind to harm a child. I just can't. Says one of the questions that they asked us, in a questionnaire model in the selection process was, you're going to be shown autopsy photos, She says, a lot. Is this something that do you think you could, be okay with? And I checked, yeah, sure. I think so, but I wasn't. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. But I know that I needed to do this, to bring justice to those kids because they didn't have any say in it. She also goes on to say, I just felt like I had more emotion than she did. And the only time I saw her have emotion was when she saw a picture of JJ. And she kissed her lips and just went like that. She motions her fingers towards the picture. It just felt like so not sincere to me, Tiffany said. How interesting. So when they show a picture of JJ, she basically kind of blew a kiss towards it. This is just showing someone who does not know how to emote, how to show emotions. This is someone who is missing that in their person. And all she can do her entire life, all she's done her entire life, is watch others and then try to emulate what others do to try and get by. Because deep down, there's something missing there for her that is not capable of love, of emotion, of showing the things that the rest of us feel that make us human. When the TV station asked Tiffany how she prepared for the trial and the evidence that she was presented, she said, I'm not really sure I did prepare myself. How can one prepare themselves to see what we saw? She described Vallow's lack of emotion at the trial as inhuman. I don't know if there's any other way to describe it. Yeah, we can go down the road of, there's this mental illness, there's this personality disorder. And at the end of the day, if we're playing doctor, she checks many of those boxes. But sometimes there are people that walk among us that you really do have to wonder the way that they think, the way that they act. Are they really human?
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers podcast
with Tony Bruschi.
And I'm not saying they're lizards or aliens or anything like that. It's just, how can someone go so far out and be that far off the rails and still function, Anyway, interesting look at the jury's opinion of what was going on in the trial from their perspective. If you like the podcast, press subscribe wherever you're downloading so you don't miss any breaking updates or discussions on the cases we're following for you right here. My name's Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.